The rumor mills are rumbling, this time about NiKo again potentially joining Falcons after the last major of this year. And stick around because a lot of people don't like this move. They think NiKo's chasing the bag, but I've got plenty of reasons why I think this move could be fantastic. At least for Falcons and at least for NiKo. Maybe not for G2, who seem like they're going to lose one of their stars, and we've got to just look at the article first of all, because obviously this is something that had been talked about in the past as potentially happening, but it seems like now an agreement might have been reached. None of this is confirmed. This is all just rumors, but they think it's about 1 to 1.2 million. 3-year contract is interesting. I don't know if I want to commit to that if I'm NiKo. I think I want more like 1 or 2 years, just in case the Falcons project goes wrong. But we'll get into all that later. I also think it's worth pointing out, again, they've got Magisk and Snappy, and he thought he was going to join, and then it seemed like he U-turned last minute, so there were already potential of this happening before. And you've also got to point out that, yes, Falcons haven't been great recently, but they did still have that semi-final run at Katowice earlier in the year when they had Boros. And I know they haven't been in great form as of late. They got Dupree in instead. And let's just go into that. Let's dive into that Katowice run, because I think a lot of people forget how solid this was as a tournament for this Falcons team. This feels like ages ago to me because Falcons have been so bad since. But they did do well here. And I guess you have to wonder, what was the difference? What allowed them to do well? I think firstly, the overall quality of Counter-Strike was probably weaker. I have to admit that, because Falcons lost against Eternal Fire early, came back against Rebels and Complexity. That's an okay win. And then they were able to beat Na'Vi. Probably their best win so far with this team. That's a solid win, and it was a pretty convincing one. This was when Na'Vi were maybe a little more inconsistent. It's not the Na'Vi we know now. And then they went into playoffs and they beat Ents, who themselves were on a kind of crazy run at this point. They've fallen off a bit. And then they lost against Spirit. So a pretty good result all in all. Losing to Spirit, no shame in that. And you look at what's different, and this is even with Boros not playing particularly well, stats-wise. Like, Boros was in all the stars roles, and look at these numbers. 1.12 rating overall. Very mediocre, in all honesty, for a player who should be a star player of your team. It was Madden, Magis, Sunpius, all having solid performances that allowed it. So that's the first reason why I think this can work. Because we've seen it work with Boros on the team, and NiKo is a complete game changer. And this Falcons team, you just look at the lineup, it is crying out for a star rifler. It is desperate for a star rifler. Sunpius, a solid AWPer, I think, at this level. Whether you can go to number 1 with him, we'll see. But he's definitely pretty good. He's not a clear problem on this team. Magisk, for me, is a player who is never going to carry you to wins. But when he is the player you have who can push you over the edge and just round out a team, he becomes so much better. And I think Magisk becomes a much better player when he has better players around him. I think he becomes much better when he has skilled players and good communicators and players who are just instinctually going to understand each other. He seems like someone who, because he relies on positioning so much, he needs the team to be well drilled. He needs to have an idea as to what the other players on his team are doing. And when you get players at the top level like NiKo, I think those two will be able to understand each other much better than maybe some of the other players on this team. So I think Magisk, who has already been solid on this team, could end up being way better. Because I have seen times where it's clear to me the overall structure of this team breaks down and it costs Magisk, who I actually think can still be a very good player in his role. Then you've got Snappy, who is someone who might end up being on the chopping block. Man's 34 years old, okay? He is 34 years old, and the stats had been bad. Like, he's had some bad tournaments statistically. Real bad. Real bad. It's tough. It's tough to see sometimes. And he has that interesting style, or had that interesting style, where he would call for all these set plays, and he would go for a lot of these fast rounds. Whether you can do that with, a Magisk on your team and a NiKo on your team, that is a potential clash right there. And then I think the question is, between Dupree and Madden, who would be the obvious one to get rid of and bring NiKo in? Because these are the two who are the riflers who are most alike to NiKo on this team. You're not bringing NiKo in for Magisk, are you? Right? Like, Magisk plays completely differently. He wants to anchor more. NiKo's not going to be doing that. So who do you get rid? You've got Dupree, who has been pretty solid statistically on Falcons. I think he's been one of their better players, in all honesty. He is 31. He's been around for a long, long time. Then you got Madden, who recently has been okay. And there was a period where he was actually very good and playing some more star roles on this team. And it was looking good. It was looking surprisingly impressive. And he is a bit younger. But I think lately he hasn't been as good. And I think the nice thing for Falcons is they're going to have a bit of time to work this out. Because if they know that NiKo is coming in through that door, they can look over these next few months and say to these players, look, if you perform really well, you can earn your spot in this team that could become one of the best in the world. I'll get into why it could become one of the best in the world later. But let's look at the positions first. On T side, you can see here, Madden is matching quite a few positions. 4 of these maps, he plays the same position as NiKo. And then for Dupree, it's what, 1 or 2? It's just us 2 and Mirage. Seems like there, Madden is the one that more clearly clashes with NiKo right now. And on CT side, again, similar. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 maps where Madden and NiKo match positions. And so, considering they're kind of similar in performance, and maybe Dupree has even been slightly better, even though in the back of my head, I would be scared that this team could become an old man team with Snappy and Dupree in there, I think it's more likely that Madden goes. I do think it's more likely that Madden goes, because I think if this team wants to challenge for titles, I don't know if you can be certain of Madden. But I also don't know if that's the only move that gets made. So I'm leaning towards Madden probably getting kicked. I'm getting messaged. I'd love to see that. It's leaning towards Madden getting kicked. I bet some of you fell for that, you know. I bet some of you thought you got a message at home. No, I'm the popular one, okay? So I'm leaning towards Madden being the one to leave for NiKo to come in. But the other important thing is this is NiKo we're talking about. This is the sort of player that attracts top players to your team. Everyone is going to want to play with NiKo. Everyone knows he is capable of carrying, of bringing teams into title contention. And so I don't think Falcons have to be done there, because this is not an organization who will sit here and spend loads and say, oh, okay, we spent loads on NiKo. We don't have any more money. We're done. No, they're not going to be like that. They can absolutely continue to try and hunt in the market. They can absolutely be aggressive with moves if they want to. And you've just got to look at some of the orgs that maybe don't have as much money. I look at Mouse, and I think to myself, that is a team that have been fantastic right now that unfortunately have a chance of getting picked apart just a bit. Because I could see Falcons going in big for someone like Shuhei. He's the obvious one. Everyone has been loving Shuhei and his ability to in-game lead for an international team. He's one of the few in-game leaders that actually is young, of the new generation, who has found a lot of success. And it would pay me to see it, because I love the rise of this Mouse team together as this unit. It feels like it's been great. It feels like they might be able to finally break through on those big stages, which is something we haven't seen in the past. But I do get the feeling that if big money comes in for Shuhei, Mouse might have to take it. And then who knows what happens to the rest of the team. So that's the other important point. I don't think they have to be done here. I don't think NiKo is here just trying to get the bag. And the other thing you've got to remember is we've got Zonic just sitting here, guys. We've got Zonic just sitting here. A legendary coach, someone who has been fantastic, and someone who, when this team was first put together, I was really interested to see how he was going to work with Snappy. Because I thought they had somewhat different styles. It seemed like Snappy always wanted to go for these fast-paced, spawn-based calls, and I feel like that worked really well when you're an underdog team. But I don't know if it's going to work if you want to be consistently challenging for titles. And I do kind of feel like that Snappy identity is maybe slightly been lost on this team. And so I do wonder whether Snappy moves out as well. And then suddenly, if you get rid of, say, Madden for NiKo, Snappy for Shuhei, this team looks pretty great. Still not 100% convinced on Dupree, but I think with the experience he has, he can probably step it up and grind for those biggest tournaments, which is what this team would want to aim for. The scary thing is, you've got to remember next year, okay? Next year, there's going to be loads of tournaments going on all the time. The circuit opens up massively. And so that's why I worry for players like Dupree, who might not be able to stick with the grind consistently. Because I did get the feeling sometimes he would elevate his level for the biggest events. And that makes sense, right? He's got other stuff going on in his life. He can't just commit as much time as some of these younger players to grinding for every single Counter-Strike tournament, right? He's not going to get out of bed for like some small Bet Boom Dasher, whatever they're playing right now. It's not going to excite him like some of the other players. But I do still think this move can be very good for NiKo and for Falcons, because they can make moves beyond this. And even if the only move that happens is NiKo in for Madden, trust me when I tell you, that can transform this team. A player like NiKo is capable of that. And this team has been crying out desperately for a focal point of firepower, for someone to rely on, for someone to really be the standout player. And it's kind of crazy they spent so much money and didn't get that, because for me, that is the core, the base of your team. You need that big name signing. You need that one player you can look to. And I think they're going to get him. So I do think this can work. And I honestly think, I might say it now, if they just get NiKo in for Madden, this team could easily just go straight top 10, can suddenly be just competing for playoffs all the time. But if they make just that little extra move, I think it can go even further. Final point is, what does this leave for G2? Because, oh my, this is going to be a weird lineup. If this happens, you get rid of NiKo. And it feels like maybe G2 have been planning for this. Because Morbs, we were all confused when he was signed because we were saying he's quite similar to NiKo. Well, if NiKo goes, suddenly Morbs is your new guy. And I was terrified that his game was going to get destroyed by putting him in bad spots and he was going to lose all his confidence. But fair play to Morbs, he's proved me wrong and been way, way better in some of these spots he's had to change to than I was expecting. So I think that can actually work. You can keep Morbs, he can be your star rifler. But if I'm Monacy, I'm still looking down this lineup at a questionable Hunter, a Snacks who is absolutely not proven, and thinking, is this where I want to be? Is that really where he wants to be when there are other options available? And he's got the pick of the options. He can go to Eastern European teams. He can go to international teams. If Falcons came with the money, I don't know if he'd want to say yes, but surely he'd at least be tempted. And so you have to assume Monacy will be prime for the picking unless G2 can find a way to get some significant upgrades. But the problem is, where do you find them? Because again, I think Shuhei is going to be such a hot commodity. I doubt you can get him, honestly. I don't know if you can attract him here. Falcons have more money and maybe even more upside once that NiKo deal gets confirmed, if it does. So then where do you go? You try and get a Kixan? You try and get someone like that? I don't know if people will be excited in quite the same way. And that's, maybe Snacks is great. And listen, I think he still could have success because this team is so talented. But even when you look at Hunter, that's someone who I sit there and I think maybe he could be upgraded. I know we heard recently, apparently, there were some rumors that Vitality were maybe going to get Hunter in for Spinks or something at some point. I don't know what that was. I don't know how true that was because those rumors were a little unsubstantiated, but still, very strange. Either way, I think it leaves G2 in a very dicey spot. I think it leaves them struggling hard to hold on to Monacy. And the weird thing is, it would not surprise me at all if G2 ended this year really strong. Especially if they know that NiKo's going. This team is just going to play loose anyway. This team could potentially play with very little pressure. There's a little part of me that actually thinks this increases their chances of just going on that mad run at the major to close out the year and actually winning it. Which would be such a weird timeline to live in, but absolutely possible. But either way, the main point is I do think that this isn't for the bag like everyone's saying, okay? And if I'm NiKo, the problem is players aren't this smart, but if I'm NiKo, why not put some things in your contract saying, okay, you have to upgrade players if you want to keep me. Like after a year, he should have the option of saying, I want to just leave my contract if we're not top 5 in the world. If he puts that in his contract, suddenly, boom, Falcons, you better believe, are going to be doing absolutely everything in their power to upgrade their team. And that is the hope. And I do think NiKo, based on the fact he didn't want to change to in-game leading, he knows he can still be a great player. He's still got that ambition, and he still hasn't had as good of a career as he could have. I don't think this is for the bag, boys. I think he wants this team to get improved. And I think when there's someone like NiKo on the team, that sort of star quality attracts other players. Let's see if I'm right. Long way to go. Oh, mate, G2 winning the major would be crazy, but I think there's a chance. Thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you next time.